I will now call to order the City of Newburgh Budget Committee meeting of April 29th, 2025. We will have a roll call and then the Pledge of Allegiance, public comments, and then election of officers. Rachel, will you please conduct a roll call?
Ned Knight,
Here.
Alex Nichols,
Here.
Theo Bora, Austin Crackraft.
Here.
Raquel Peregrino de Brito,
Here.
Judy Brown,
Here.
and it looks like Elias Semeniuk is absent. Bill Rosacker,
Here.
Jerry Turgeson,
Here.
Derek Carmen is absent. Peggy Kilberg is absent. Counselor Yarnell Holloman, or at least here. And Counselor McBride
Here.
and Counselor Wheatley. Here. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will now open the floor to public comment. Rachel, did we receive any public comments?
No, we do not.
I will now close the public comment session. Now, the next item is conducting election of officers. First, I will take nominations for chair.
I'll nominate you.
For the record, could you say the name?
Roselle.
There.
I'm gonna, but can you say your last name?
Raquel Peregrino
Thank
de
you.
Brito.
Beautiful.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Very long.
I'll
Hard to
second
spell. Any other nominations? Hearing none, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The committee appoints Raquel Peregrino de Brito as Chair of Budget Committee. I will now take nominations for Vice Chair.
I would like to nominate Judy Brown.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, let's take a vote. All in favor? Oh, do we have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
And any other? So hearing none, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The committee appoints Judy Brown as Vice Chair of the Budget Committee. We now go on to overview of budget and general changes, on to reports and presentations where we have a number of items to cover tonight. I will now turn it over to the city's finance director, Katie Strode. Katie Strode.
Thank you. Okay, so let's start off with the general fund resources on page 16 in your budget books. And if anybody didn't bring their budget book, I have one extra copy over there if you need it, but I think everybody has theirs. Good. So I'm going to go over probably the main ones, probably because we don't need to cover each and every one of these, but I'm going to cover the big ones that had some changes here. Property taxes. This one for the proposed biennium, we did do the 3% allowed by charter for each year, plus 3% for growth each year, which has been based on historical trends. So that's what you'll see there for that current year taxes on the first line. And then you'll see a number of franchise fees on here. Most of these we've trued up based on revenue that we've received. A lot of these we've received more revenue than what you see on that adopted budget for FY 2025. Particularly the I believe it's the franchise fee for gas. Because PGE had such a large increase the last couple of years, our revenue that we've been receiving for that has gone up significantly. So I've tried to true that up based on what we've received this year. And then generally the franchise fees go up about 7%. So that's why you'll see some of those have jumped a little bit. Business licenses, that's a new one this year for the general fund. Last month, council had approved us to sunset Fund 14. And that was a revenue that lived in Fund 14 previously. And so based on the council's decision for that, we wanted to sunset Fund 14, which was originally designed for CET. And since we don't have CET taxes anymore, we wanted to take out the only revenue source that it had currently and move that to the general fund. So that is what we have been anticipating for those to come in. Local taxes. Those are our local marijuana taxes. So we've seen a slight increase on those that we're expecting over the next 2 years. The community development fee, we're expecting that to be pretty similar to this year, but a very slight increase. Just because we're expecting planning and permits to just kind of level off and be similar to what we've seen this year, but maybe slowly go up over the next several years. The state shared revenues, I talked about the last meeting, how the liquor taxes in particular are declining. So I've trued that up closer to what we're anticipating to receive this year and then projecting out what the state is expecting us to receive, which is a decrease actually from this year. So that's why that number looks significantly smaller for 2 years in particular. I think the only one that was going to see an increase for the next 2 years was going to be the marijuana tax from the state shared revenue portion. The Dundee police contract, that goes up annually per our contract we have with the city of Dundee. Reimbursements, we kind of trued that up to what we've been receiving. A lot of these are just our typical reimbursements we get from the state of Oregon, from the DOJ for our court revenue that we have and subpoena revenue that we get for being reimbursed for that. The school district SRO money, that is based on the new contract that's been signed with the school district. So we know what those 2 future years are going to be. The planning and subdivision one, you'll see that one is a pretty large increase. So that one we trued up based on what we had this year. So this year we're going to be close to 250 to 270,000 that we received. And we've had some pretty big plan reviews that have come in, or some design reviews, I should say. And so we're expecting that to be a little bit less than this year, but not quite as low as what we originally budgeted for in FY25 at the 100,000 mark. So we put that somewhere in the middle on that. And then court fines, we also are receiving a lot more than what we had budgeted. So I trued that up to what we've been getting plus a slight increase over the next 2 years, just based on historical trends with that one. Traffic school, because we're expecting to have the red light cameras come on, and plus with our slight increase of citations that we're already getting, that makes more traffic school eligible people. So that makes that revenue will go up significantly, especially with the red light cameras coming on. The red light camera revenue, we've continued to budget at the 250,000 each year, and we're expecting to get that up sometime this summer, assuming the RFP goes well. Opioid revenue, we've seen a pretty big decline in the rest of the year. We haven't really gotten anything else other than the 83,000 that we budgeted. So we cut that in half for each year going forward, because we're still expected to receive some, but it's probably going to be a lot less over the next several years. And then the sale of asset number on there includes the Butler property sale that we're expecting to go through next fiscal year. And then the TLT we kind of talked about last time, that's sort of starting to taper off a little bit. So we projected in there a 4% increase for the next 2 years. And those are kind of the main ones. Did anybody have any other questions on the revenues? Yes.
How much do we have as, how much balance do we have for the interest in, LGIP? That's earning that interest.
You're asking how much cash we have in LGIP?
Yeah,
Around 58 million we have sitting in there.
can we add the contingency fund or the reserve that we have to bump that up so we have more interest that we're earning?
Right now we've got the most because we have our, treasury stock where we have set aside for our water plant. That's an
Okay.
separate investment. And then we have the LGIP money, and then we have a smaller amount that we keep in our checking. So we usually try and keep as much as we can in the
Yeah.
LGIP for interest purposes.
Okay.
So we're trying to really maximize that as much as we can.
And then on the red light, I don't remember if we talked about why we're installing a red light. Is that for like to lessen the traffic accidents on that area?
Yeah, we've had a lot of safety concerns in that specific 99 and Villa intersection and a lot of
Okay.
complaints we've gotten.
So is there a plan to, if the accidents are reduced, we take it out? Or is it gonna be there forever?
So with regard to that, we actually tried to get ODOT to allow us to have multiple installations to completely calm traffic flow through downtown, because to this day, people drive through our town like idiots, and there's a lot of risk to families and children. Unfortunately, ODOT, of the ones we asked for, only gave us the license for that side of the couplet. We tried to get one at Main. Also, the police department had asked for one near the hospital as well. So for now, this is the one we're looking at. If we started to have a time when we were seeing much lower citation counts for speeding, if people started to have respect for their fellow resident and care about children's safety, then at that juncture, we could take it out. But for now, I think it's just important to get people to slow down passing through our downtown couplet. Maybe one day, if the bypass actually finishes, the ideal dream of all dreams would be to move all of that traffic around downtown and make it like a 20-mile-an-hour zone or whatever the minimum is.
I don't know if we looked into like Newburgh, Scott, I mean, Sherwood, that's like red light. And I know it's. Yeah.
And nobody's learned.
I think that they do have an effect, and I do think that the way people drive through Sherwood is different from the way they drive through Newburgh.
Yeah.
I think we all feel that anecdotally, and we have some crash hotspots, particularly near Springbrook, which is a really bad crash hotspot. Villa, we've had lots of crashes there, even all the way down to Everest, which of course is near and dear to my heart because that's where we live. But I think that having that sort of mitigation is probably going to be really positive. Will we come to a time when people will stop driving stupid so as to get to their location 3 minutes early? I don't know, mate.
I think the most sensitive spot of a person is the pocket, right? I know I have gotten a ticket in the Sherwood light and I always go slow because they have a picture of me. Couldn't even blame someone else.
Yeah.
So, so with that said, having the safety, I am with you. I don't want a light or any kind of punishment for driving behavior to be associated purely with the intent of having revenue. And that would be wrong, and I don't think that this is the case here. I think I've, don't go on Facebook a lot, but, you know, I have seen several times where, did you see that accident on Villa with 99 and I saw, you know, so it happens. I've seen lots of, so, but I do have a question specifically on that, because we know that we have had issues with the vendor and whatnot, you guys setting up for success, and I have zero concerns with that, other than when I look at the actuals here, someone actually really did pay $87.
Yes, that was from, when we had the Springbrook one a long time ago. When you send things to collections, sometimes we actually, we
So this
do
is not
actually.
even from this new one.
No, this is from a long time ago. We actually got something on
Wow,
collections.
that is-
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do notice that people, I didn't tell anyone that, about any of this, didn't tell my husband either. So hopefully he's not watching, but hopefully it'll be set up again soon, and we'll, for the numbers you've seen of occurrence, even if you're not able to capture them and issue citations because of a system, you are confident that 250 is a good estimate. So, okay, go on. Any other questions, anyone?
Yeah, I have a question. Why is it that we have planning in the general fund when we have a planning fund?
Which one is the planning fund?
Well, on the resources, it would be I can't find it.
Are you going to
By the way,
page
bigger-
15?
Larger writing would be helpful to old people.
Bill, are you asking about the planning, that, head
Well, we
count
got the-
that
We
is,
got the permit center. We've got the planning subdivision fees. And then, of course, on the revenue, we have employees for planning. I mean, on the requirement side.
I guess the question is, why are they in general and not specifically to any other planning fund?
No, we have funds for planning, and so why are those in the general fund instead of the planning?
I think because the planning staff for community development is paid out of the general fund. So the revenues for those personnel are associated in this fund.
Okay.
What fund are you thinking of? Are you thinking of Fund 14
Yeah, well,
or the building fund?
yeah, the building.
Yeah, because the building fund has all of the building revenues associated. These ones are all planning permits associated
We
with
have
the
a
planning.
community development fund. Building, economic development. Yeah, 14 and 8.
Yes. So the Fund 8 is the building fund specifically, and so anything that's a building permit will have those revenues associated in it. Anything for planning lives in the general fund, and that the planning associated revenues will live in the general fund with it also.
So
And then
what you're
Fund
try-
14
So
doesn't
what you're
have
trying to say is that the building fund, it does not pay for itself, so it needs some admin fund for you to be able to pay the personnel to run that. Is that a simple explanation of what you just said?
No, it does have its own revenues, but it's specifically building permits.
Right.
Building and plumbing permits associated with. And then the building expenses in there are building employees, like
Got
the
it.
building inspector and the
Got it.
plumbing inspector are there, whereas the community development fee is all related to planning permits, and then the planning staff is in the general fund,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Sure.
So the two fee bases are for two different types of functions. The building division staff and the building division fees are for blokes that are actually looking at, are the timbers true? Is the cement pour even? Physical stuff that's in the field. Whereas the planning review work, which is in the general fund, and the planning staff, which are also in the general fund, those are on the side of looking at plans and schematics and not in the field. So that's how come they do two different things.
Yeah.
And why the state didn't decree that there would be planning funds instead of building funds, that would be some Oregon state thing from who knows
Got it.
when, but
Yeah,
As you set up the budget and the way that you obviously follow the format and the requirements of, for setting it up, and you are required to have a building fund.
yeah,
for-
because
from the
those
plan.
are special revenue, so they're
Right.
restricted to use
Right,
only for
for this.
building.
Right.
Whereas the planning permits have an unrestricted use, so they can live in the general fund.
Got it.
Yeah,
never understood why the state did that, because they could have said, you also have to have a planning fund, but they didn't.
It wasn't many years ago, we didn't spend the time and money on planning that we did have.
By the state.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions on this? Before, page 16 and the resources and general fund? Go on.
okay, I will move on to page 17. Talk about the transfers. So there's a big change here for the transfers out to debt service. So this is where we've budgeted for our payoff of that communication tower debt that we're anticipating happening within the biennium, assuming success of the debt reduction plan. So that will be the final payment of that. And then for the reserves down here, again, reserves are in 1-year increments for a biennial budget. That's why those aren't doubled. And those are all fairly the same as they were last year, except you'll notice there is no sinking fund anymore because that money has moved up to the debt service payment to pay off that debt. And that's all of that unless anybody has any questions. And we'll move on to general government. That is 19. Actually, I guess we'll move on to page 20 has the numbers.
General government.
Let me put on my second hat here and come up and talk to you guys about your general government fund. So general government fund is the fund where most of council, committee, and, those expenses are. There are not very many changes to this. The main change you'll see is with the community support line. And that is to support projects related to council goals such as the downtown beautification efforts. Generally though, things stayed about the same. We made a couple increases, I believe, to dues and meetings because of increases to COG dues, the community, the council government's dues. Other than that, any questions?
Community support. It's a pretty big increase.
Yeah. So that's the one, the increase is to support those council goals that have been stated. So a lot of it's downtown beautification efforts. There's other council goals that we supported through that effort.
Were there many, I'm sure you have recorded all the requests and the changes, and they were assessed thoroughly to explain pretty much a 16K increase. Okay. Yep.
So specifically, what is professional services?
Like,
Oh, I'm
is
sorry.
that your question too?
Oh, good.
So professional
Because
services.
it's gone up a lot. I know that's this, we're looking at 2 years here, but I was just curious.
Professional services is generally used to pay for any outside contractors we bring in to work on projects, to pay for, like, sometimes it's paying for, access to a resource like a software we use for a program. So it's the different support services that we use to run different things. And so for you guys, sometimes that, we don't do this here, but other cities will use it for, building your strategic plan. They'll bring in a person to work on that. So you guys have some funds available for this work. Yeah, yes, please.
So if you were to decide to do an extra retreat and have a facilitator, that would cover that. we don't have a clear concept of exactly what you might want to use this money for, but given that the council goals have pivoted towards downtown beautification, that might trigger other things that would require some professional contracts. Like, for example, there was a discussion about perhaps copying what Poysdorf does with its art thing to make it like a wine corridor. That might involve artist fees or similar things.
Which fund is that?
This is our general government, so this is basically the council and committee expenses,
Which item are we talking about?
professional services.
And this is something for council to discuss, I think. As you may know, there are several groups that are intentionally working towards that goal. And I am sure that you guys are working with them, with the arts project. I know a lot of folks that are doing some great things, so. Any other questions on, the general government expenditures?
Yeah, I have one more. Why did the admin support service go down by so much in that 2-year period?
That's Will's.
Are you looking at the internal charge?
Yeah,
So that is based on, we have a spreadsheet that we do. It's an allocation, like a cost center. So we look at all of the ones that live in the Fund 31, which we'll get to. And we look at all of those costs and they get charged out to different departments based on certain criteria. And this one happened to go down just because there were less charges that the council uses for our internal services, just for how we allocate things like that. And you'll see that on almost all of the departments in the general fund. Yeah.
Like our internal.
Any other questions? All right.
Awesome. So we'll move to page 22 to talk about municipal court. Thanks, Rachel. So besides the normal increases on personnel, the materials and services budget for this one did not really increase. We had a supplemental budget this fiscal year, which covered the 2 increases that just carried over into the biennium. One of them was for travel and training, to send one of our court staff to the Tyler Technologies conference, which is our financial system. So we wanted to be able to do that again in the next biennium. And the other increase that we did this fiscal year that carried over was for the court prosecution expenses. We added a second Spanish interpreter to some of our court days, just because we were getting the need for having more interpretation. So there was an increase in this current year budget for that we also just carried over that same cost. So you won't see a direct increase on this budget because it was an increase we made this year that we carried over. Any questions on court? Okay, we'll move to police. So we'll move to page 26.
hello. Forgot where I put my glasses.
I will start on for the personnel, actually on page 25. You won't see last year's FTE count on here, but we did talk last meeting. So in this FTE count is 1 additional police officer added to this budget as part of our succession planning to start and hire ahead for those upcoming retirements that we're anticipating in the next 5 or 6 years. So I just wanted to note that you'll see that increase in patrol for that. Okay, back on 26.
Yep, so I will start with 2110, that group, 610000, which would be capital outlay. We've asked for a $15,000 increase in that.
primarily for the cost of vehicles that, keeps going up. Any questions? Okay. So we can skip that one. So, I wasn't gonna go into the ones that are maybe $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000. It seems, like a waste of time, but, so, in the same group of 2120, there's, line 525000.
That's on page 27.
Sorry. That one, I guess, is also about a $2,500 expense. It's basically for, lodging and training. Pardon? Well, it's a pool for all of patrol. And so, you know, with just basically trying to keep up with inflation. That's what most of ours are. We do have a couple of additions. So the next one,
One question about that,
Yep.
just for, obviously I support it, but, how often, is there like a cadence that you do with your officers so that they all have a opportunity? Is it like every year or every other year?
sure. So, we have annual training. We have, maintenance training for certifications. We've tried to move a lot of that in-house. I know like some other agencies, I just looked at, I think it was Tualatin, theirs is like $125,000 for training. We do a lot of in-house stuff, online stuff, briefing training, you know, that kind of stuff. So we try to be creative and not, to hold the cost down, basically. We also have a lot of our own trainers, that we've spent money on, so that, you know, we get consistency. We don't have to book a hotel room. We don't have to pay for meals and that kind of stuff. So we're pretty creative. You know, when you go from, say, 125,000 down to 27,000, I feel like we're trying to not pinch pennies, but we're trying to provide good training, but things that we can do in-house to keep the cost down. Did that answer that? Okay. So same prefix, it will be 2120-533-045 maintenance agreements. That one, you'll know that is a large increase, and that is due to e-ticketing that we're bringing on this year. That is, in the maintenance agreements, that's gonna be $27,500. It's just what it is. The software, we wanted to make sure, there were a couple different options. We wanted to make sure that it would, it was compatible with court. So we don't have two different kinds of, software that are competing or just don't work.
And that's gonna really save a lot of staff time to having that, because right now there's a lot of data entry with citations, and now it's just gonna automatically import in. So it's just gonna be a big time saver for the court's end.
And, I know you guys, probably will not believe it, but some of the officers don't write very well. So
Yes,
spelling is a problem.
Yes.
I mean, they write just fine, but, it's the handwritten citations when someone's trying to figure out what it is. And, I really anticipate this, hopefully, allowing us to not have to hire another court staff. I mean, we'll take a look at that. So while you're saving money on you're spending money on technology, you might be able to save money on, personnel, which, as you know, is expensive. This is a smaller one, but I'll bring it up anyway. It is in section 2150. I should have put the page numbers on here. I apologize. 29, thank you.
was there anything in investigations?
There was investigations, but it was very small.
Okay,
I wanted, there's like a couple $1,000s in overtime
Yeah.
just to keep up.
Next question on
Yes, sir.
2120. So I'm looking at the K-9 one where we spent it's 529000. We spent 22,000 in
K-9.
24. We budgeted 12,000 in 2025. And we're
Staying at 12,000 a year.
12,000 a year, but I mean, the actuals
I
is
know.
at 22.
I believe that's when we had one of the dogs die. Yeah,
Oh,
we
so
had to replace it.
Okay,
We had a replacement and then we also had surgery.
Yeah.
And then what's the, replacement schedule for vehicles, since we're not, doesn't look like we're gonna replace any vehicles for patrol.
That's all out of one pool. In the,
Oh, so we're not budgeting it in patrol, it's somewhere else?
well, so 21-20. Oh, I'm sorry. So, that capital replacement with the 61-0-0-0-0.
Yeah.
That, we moved that just to 21-10. So there aren't any, replacements specific to, patrol versus detectives. It's all out of that one account in 21-10. Instead of having each department have its own,
Oh, you just put it all in
yes, sir.
21?
We just pull it all into one.
Okay. That's
Good
fine.
question, though. So this is a smaller one that won't take much, time. We brought back, our, National Night Out. So, I think last year we budgeted $3,000. It keeps growing and doubling. So, I'm sorry, for the last 2 years. We brought it back, it doubled, and I think hopefully we'll be able to double it again. It's a pretty fun event, lots of kids. So I've asked instead of 3,000 to 5,500. Again, not a big ask, but it's another community event that we take part in. Yeah. I know. So 2310, and I contemplated if I was gonna go ahead and give the number first. It's 32.
Before we move on, do we have anything on police before we move on to dispatch and communications?
Budgeted in,
2170 is actually for just reserve police officers. It's a little confusing. It's just for the officers in the reserve department. So that money covers basically everything. I'm looking at 5.
Yeah, I'm not sure we've spent anything on uniforms this year. So I think the only thing we've spent for reserves this year was the ammunition. So I think that's what carried over on the budget for next year.
It is difficult. The ones that we have, we're really trying to hang on to. It's correct. Yeah, and if they do need uniforms, we'll buy them out of there. But yeah, we're trying to keep that reserve. When I was here, I'm sorry, I'm still here. When I started, I should just leave and come back. When I first started, I was one of about 12 or 13 reserves, and we're lucky to have the 5 that we have. And they're full-time. They have no full-time other jobs. They make more than police officers, and they just want to give back to the community. So we're lucky to have. They probably save us, I would say probably 2.5 full-time employees, but the best part, or the other portion of that, is we use them maybe 2 to 6 hours at a time. So you don't have that overtime cost. And, like I said, we don't use and abuse them, but they are very valuable to us.
Quick question for that. I noticed that they don't have do we loop them into it? Like, would training be a value add for them to keep them engaged as a positive? Or do they just,
They
are they
have
covered
to,
in the other training bucket?
yeah, they have to maintain all the same certifications. We just pay for it out of patrol, because that's where
Okay.
$11,800 is pretty cheap.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah,
That's why I was
so,
like, do they need
we're
training?
not
What do
able to
they
pay
need?
them. Yeah, we're not able to pay them. But like I said, we try to treat them well, and they have to maintain the same level of certifications that we do. So, and that's another reason why, a lot of in-house training is very nice. We can set them up, they can grab a computer and do 3 or 4 hours of training, and it costs the department nothing.
Thank you.
Yes.
So in the capital outlay, the money that's there is for an extra police patrol car, correct?
No.
Oh, I
Which
thought
one?
it-
He's talking about the capital outlay. 2110.
in 2110? Oh, you're talking about the extra 15,000 that we're asking?
Yeah, well, the total amount that, looks like it doubled in the capital outlay from,
The 690,000.
right.
So that they spend periodically. So he's got a whole savings plan for, some of that money gets put aside each year to go into their savings pool, their capital rollover money, and some of it gets used for their police replacement vehicle with the leases, and then if they have to replace any cars, some of it is for that. This is what you're asking, right? Yeah, okay.
Right, so I'm assuming if we've got one officer figured coming in on this budget, we're gonna have an extra car that we're buying.
I think we'll be okay. And just to, I can go into it more if you would like. My savings plan, that we work with, Katie is, it's for vehicles, body worn cameras, computer forensics, mobile, MDTs, basically mobile data terminals within the cars, 800 megahertz radio, and then capital outlay. So like a smaller fund for if we need to fix something within the building,
Yeah.
or an addition that we didn't budget for. So, and we use it every year on something. We just replaced part of the evidence room, storage facility, those types of things. So yeah, we're earmarking $15,000 for cars. And that's the capital savings plan that I meet with Katie probably 3 or 4 times a year, specifically just for that account, that savings account. And we don't spend a dime without letting her know. Cause I don't want to get sideways with the money one.
That's right.
Last year was the first year we had capital rollover savings plans. The reason why we did it is we were replacing the old scenario, which is where we would have a disaster happen every 3 or 4 years, and then somebody would have to come to council to beg for a supplemental budget adjustment after the old thing had broken or we didn't have the money anymore. So instead, we brought in a program where the departments who want to opt in can have a savings plan and put money aside every year towards buying larger equipment or elements of that equipment. So that's the savings plan that the chief was alluding to, and some other departments have one as well.
So if you want to see what they've saved up so far, that is on page 17. And then that is the second one on the contingency that ends in 80002. And there's 631,000 on there. So that is what they've saved up so far, starting at the beginning of next year. For these replacements, which the biggest one, I believe you said, was radios.
Yeah, my goal is to have, because there are gonna be some other things come up, so that will ebb and flow. My goal is, with Katie, work in the 2033 and 35 biennium to have $500,000 in their radio fund to replace the radios. So that we're not hitting the taxpayers for a giant, check, you know, if, I don't know what they're gonna cost, but that's gonna go a heck of a long ways for replacing, replacement radios. And, you know, our radios are, the one on my hip is, retails at about $8,000 because it says police on the side, unfortunately. But, you know, they last for 10, 15 years or longer. You just, Motorola, you don't have problems with. I don't get any commission by mentioning Motorola, by the way. I'm just my experience.
we
They've been, yeah, no kidding. Yeah, on the side, like NASCAR. So, that's one of my goals. And of course, you know, we're gonna be spending over $100,000 on cars as we go. We used to budget differently and it was very difficult to maintain your fleet. And that was one of the first things that always got cut. And we're probably spending about $30,000 more, and we've been able to turn the fleet over in 3 years. We had, I think I told most of this group, we had cars, probably 75% of our cars had over 100,000 miles. And there are times where we're doing 100 miles an hour, and you know, all the maintenance in the world doesn't keep up with safety features and all that other stuff. So I feel like we're driving much better cars, much newer cars with better safety features. So that's probably gonna be our biggest reoccurring expense every year.
And it helps that we're saving instead of all of a sudden having to replace all of these radios for $800,000 when we wouldn't have that money otherwise. But now we've got a little bit saved every year based on the plan, and then it just won't surprise us when something that massive comes up. So
Just quickly, to go out and get a new patrol car with all the features,
$62,000.
62,000, okay.
Or a little more. Does when you're trying to budget.
yeah.
The build on the cars just to put the equipment in, sorry, for the equipment and to build it in, we use a local vendor, is really right about $15,000. If we can reuse some of that equipment, I think we can save somewhere between $7,000 and $5,000. So by buying the same model year, we'll be able to save some of that money because we don't have to buy new equipment. We can pull it out. Yeah, so that's another benefit for the fleet program. Okay,
Any
so
other
we're-
questions? We're back on page 32. And then before you go on yours, I just wanted to mention the FTE change. So you'll see for the dispatch, the FTE goes up by 2 on FY 27. And that's part of the debt reduction plan where we remove that communication officer fee in Fund 16. And those dispatchers that are supported by that fee will shift to the general fund in that fiscal year. So it's not that we're adding staff, it's just a budgetary shift of staffing on that.
Yes.
Okay, before we jump in, I just have to say for all my call center nerds that these response times are like amazing. And I just want to say thank you to that whole crew because if only healthcare could operate like that. So that is really, really, really impressive.
Yeah, our dispatch manager does a good job with scheduling. And then, of course, I think most of you know Captain Simmons. They work together to hold that thing together. There's only 10 of them. Yeah, for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's why the overtime is, you gotta send them to training and vacations and all that stuff, so. Okay, ready to go?
Yes.
Page 32, and it's 2310.
Thanks, here.
533045, maintenance agreements. These are, is there one there? These are contractual agreements, that's the only reason for the increase. We didn't add anything. It's just, like I said, just contractual in dispatch.
Software.
Yeah. Like, Central Square, is going up 3,000, Net Motion 2,000, so, Telus went up 9,000. These are all just contractual agreements. That's it.
Okay. And any questions on dispatch? Welcome. Thank you for making it.
Yeah, I can. How about, would you like if I just gave you these and then you can ask me questions?
All right, thank you.
I'll be back. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
And then we'll move to library on page 35.
Hello, good evening. I do not have a lot of changes. So really, if there's anything you would like to ask me about, I am happy to talk about that. We're continuing to see growth in circulation for the library. We were at 375,000 last fiscal year of item checkouts with almost, or over, 99,000 library visits. Really super love to get that to 100,000. We'll see if that happens this year. Yeah, we've got our staff, got a great staff. Our programming numbers are really high, and we continue to serve all ages in our community. So I have a little bit more in materials. That's about a little over $8,000. And as you can see from the narrative, this hasn't gone up since 2018, 2019, but our checkouts do continue to go up. They even went up by, let's see, circ events were increased by 48,000 between 2022, 2023 and 2023, 2024. So those have gone up quite a bit too. We need more money in our budget for materials. So I didn't do a big ask, but I did do a small ask for that one. Any questions for me?
Looking at the line for internal charge, admin support services, that went up quite a bit.
Yeah, again, a lot of that has to do with our allocation and cost sharing. And those float around every year based on services that the library utilize. I think in the past, this library has utilized more of IT services and facilities over the last couple of years. So that kind of fluctuated a little bit more this year. It's our internal charges that we do to pay for the Fund 31. So it pays for all of the staffing there. So it's a cost allocation worksheet that we do to allocate out how we fund those things.
Okay, I'm gonna push back a little bit. I feel like supplies and equipment, that's so insignificant to what is probably needed. And $17,000 for an entire year of supplies and equipment, I cannot even imagine having to budget that. That's like, what, $1,200 a month?
So we have two different, oops, sorry. Let me pull this up. So we have two different accounts here. We have office supplies, and then we also have supplies and equipment. So I would say those two together. Office supplies is the very first one under materials and services. So there's a lot of overlap between those two as well. So I appreciate the concern, but I actually do feel like we're doing okay with that. Yeah. Maintenance agreements goes up every year. I don't have a lot of control over that one. Same with utilities, actually.
What would your maintenance agreements be on?
So we have maintenance agreements with Rico. So we have our copy machines. That's probably one of our biggest expenses. Yeah. Thought you were gonna say something.
Nope.
So just different items like that. That probably the copier is the biggest one. And then we do take in money for when the public comes in to make copies, we do charge for copies as well. Yeah, so that is, that is some funds that come back as well. We don't charge a lot, but we do charge for this.
Any other questions?
One more.
Yes.
For books and publications, why is that flat? I'm just curious if our circulation has increased so significantly over the last 3 years, if we want to increase our.
So I am asking for an increase in all of our materials. So there is some in books and publications, there's some in children's books, there's some in audiovisual, there's some in e-resources. So I've kind of spread that out between the different accounts.
Yeah,
as
so
well.
this increase that you speak of, the 17K, spread out through all of these accounts, each a little bit one. So we
Yes.
don't see that big number. We'll see the big number in the overall cost of it,
Exactly.
total line, but I think you're doing a really good job of spreading that around, and nobody knows better where should go more than you guys. So
We do look at a lot of statistics when we're figuring that out.
Yeah.
If you want to give me a lot more, you can.
And I am sure you would put to good use, so.
I'm sure we would.
All right. Any other questions for library? All right.
Okay. No, yes, no, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. All right, we'll move on to planning. And that is on page 38. Scott?
Good evening, members of the committee. Scott Siegel, Community Development Director. I'm here to discuss a handful of changes that I think you may have already observed in the proposed budget relating to planning. And I just say as an overview, planning is one division within the Community Development Department, and it is funded solely through the general fund. We have personnel in planning who also support functions in the building division, as well as more recently, we have brought engineering staff into community development. And I'll be covering that in a moment. So it's really an integrated development services department that we're trying to offer. And so just at a very high level, one of the changes that we're proposing, and it's reflected in the schedule of FTE, is to add the senior engineer to the planning division. And that individual performs development review. So you think about a one-stop shop for development, the process looks like this. There's planning, and that's the process that city manager was describing earlier, where we're looking at schematics, we're looking at zoning code compliance, we're looking at annexations, basically setting the stage for development and making sure that the development process can move forward smoothly. And then we go into development engineering, and that's where this senior engineer, among other personnel, are looking at public improvement plans. Does the road need to be widened? What sorts of utilities need to go in to serve that new development? So that's really different than capital projects planning, which the city manager will be discussing in a separate session, where we have engineering staff who perform both functions, but in terms of planning, this division and this individual in particular, the senior engineer, is supporting that development services function of the city. And so sort of in the spirit of reorganization and creating a more integrated process, we've brought this individual into the planning division. So the total FTE, and it's sort of, there are several moving parts here. The total FTE are 6, but we have 2 individuals, including myself, and an administrative assistant who are funded through both the planning division and the building fund. And the reason for that is that we both perform some managerial and administrative support functions to the building division. And I've worked with other jurisdictions that are very protective of that building fund, and they will not allow anyone to, to have sort of shared resources among different departments or divisions. Newburgh, fortunately, I think recognizes the process that we have, that it needs to be integrated, that we have, at least speaking for myself, I have oversight and responsibility for planning, building, and now more recently development engineering. So a good amount of my time is broken out in that way. 45% of my time, community development director, is in the planning division, 45% is in the building division, and 10% now will be in overseeing and guiding our development engineering staff. So I wanted to give you that overview because it does affect the numbers. And when you look at the salaries and wages, I had to actually ask the finance director, is this right? Because the total for the biennium is less than if you were to multiply the 2025 cost by 2. And the reason for that is this reallocation of some of the personnel to the building fund. And it does not reflect the additional FTE for development engineering, which is now in 4111. So I just wanted to provide that overview on salaries and wages. So it looks like it's a decrease. It's actually kind of a wash. And it does reflect increases in steps, and as people are achieving higher levels of proficiency, being able to classify them appropriately. In the narrative statement, we talk about how we have 2 planners who have been approved for reclassification. So that's reflected in here, reflecting their growth and greater proficiency in planning. We also have, let's see, but then at the sort of the bottom line on that on the personnel costs, they actually do go up because of the increase in health insurance and other benefits. So that's one change. It's sort of not an increase other than sort of the increasing costs of staffing. The next change that I'll touch on is travel and training, and that is an increase. It's a significant increase, and that's reflecting the personnel in the planning division who have additional training and requirements and are working towards certification as professional planners. Yes.
But there is a small decrease in travel and training from the capital engineering division to reflect the moving of this one FTE over.
Okay, thank you. Next change is under maintenance agreements, and that's a decrease from the previous fiscal year, which I believe reflects now we've adopted and we're deploying OpenGov, our new online permitting software. And so there was a lump sum cost associated with that in this past year for the subscription or for the purchasing the software and having it configured. And so going forward, we will have a maintenance cost for that each department, including engineering and the utilities funds, all support that, and planning also supports that. The next change, a very significant decrease, which some of you may have observed, is in professional services. And so the amount that had been budgeted last year for that was $376,500. I believe the actuals to date on that are zero, or very close to zero. And the reason for that is that almost all of that fund was budgeted for outside services, consultants to assist the city with urban growth boundary planning work, expanding the city's urban growth boundary. And over the course of the year, we've received direction from the city council to focus our work in certain areas that don't require as much outside services. So the focus on industrial lands and employment growth is an area where we feel that we're fully capable of delivering that body of work over the next 2 years with minimal consultant support. So we've budgeted, I believe, $50,000 over the next 2 years, should we need it, to complete that task and to execute on the urban growth boundary for industrial land. There's also an amount in there that's approximately, I think, $50,000 over the next 2 years that would focus on our obligations under state law to update our housing plan. And for those on council, you'll recall that we presented a housing plan and we were directed to go back to the state and ask for an opportunity to redo that work over a longer period of time, which they approved. And so we now have a 2027 deadline to begin, or actually to complete that work. And so of the $161,000 that's budgeted here, approximately $50,000 each would be for the industrial land work and the housing work. Now, the good news on that is that we're pursuing grants. We will be pursuing grants for all of that. And we've been advised by the state that we are eligible for that, and we'll continue to report to the city council on that. And then there's a smaller amount, I think it's about $16,000, that's for historic preservation work that's aligned with the council's goal for improving the downtown and focusing on that. So, and the Historic Preservation Commission has added that to their work program, that they want to update or at least update and correct parts of the city's historic resources inventory. So that's the big change there under professional services. It's a decrease, but there is a large body of work that the planning division will be pursuing over the next 2 years, consistent with the city council's goals. The last significant change is, as you've heard from your finance director, is under internal charges and support. And that's not something that we control as a department. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I'm also willing to move into the development engineering budget if you'd like.
I got a question on your write-up. It says revenue is expected to remain flat due to the slowdown in development that is attributed to interest rates. And with additional personnel for engineering, are we supposed to charge more for engineering services?
Yeah, can you repeat the first part of that?
So it says significant changes on page 37. Revenue is expected to remain flat due to the slowdown in development that is attributed to interest rates remaining relatively high and a healthy backlog of residential lots with planning approvals, including the 400 lot Colinas subdivision. Potential grant revenues, but so we're adding an engineering position, a senior engineer. Are we I mean, if we're
I think-
earning revenue, shouldn't it go up?
Yeah, thank you, committee member. Or I think if I understand, correct me if I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So how are we accounting for that additional cost in planning? And so this is an individual, this is a position that is currently funded by the utilities funds. And so I believe, and the city manager can correct me, that those costs on those charges to the utilities fund will be decreased as charges to the general fund and the planning division will offset that to pay for this position. So we're not adding any additional FTE or personnel costs. We're moving that position into a different department.
Yeah, it's not a new FTE. We just moved him to planning.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was confusing, sorry.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So I just saw recently, just this last weekend, Polish Homes is now advertising, new homes that they're gonna be building out the north side of town here. Do you anticipate that they'll start maybe getting permits and stuff like the middle of this next year and might really start ramping up? That would affect this budget maybe a little bit more than what we're kind of thinking
Yeah.
about now?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor McBride. It's a great question. So we have a great backlog of lots that are approved on paper, and some of those lots are now coming online. So the work that you see off Mountain View is the Colina subdivision. It's a 400 lot development, and the first phase of that development has it's very close to final plat approval, and we have in fact issued permits for the model home. So you'll see that going up shortly. And we're expecting a whole wave of new single family lots to come in this spring and summer. So you will begin to see that. The question around that development is just how quickly will those homes be absorbed? And so conservatively, we've estimated, I think, based on about a 1% growth rate that the city historically has experienced. Now, if we overperform on that, then we'll be in a good position, but we've tried to be conservative.
I like to be wrong in that direction. Not the other way. Yeah.
And there were other developments. I didn't go into a whole, report on development, but we have a approximately 100 unit apartment project going up off Springbrook that is in for building permits now. And there are a number of other smaller projects that are in the pipeline as well.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to Fund 31, Administrative Services Fund. So we'll start on page 44. Again, these revenues all primarily come from our cost sharing worksheet that we do to determine what needs these internal services departments require based on what the other departments need to contribute. So the other funds that contribute are personnel funds. So that's why the general fund contributes so much, because the general fund holds around 50% of the personnel or staffing. And then the utility funds also support funds 2, 6, 7, 17, and then also the building fund contributes to these as well. And then you'll also see a large decrease on the beginning fund balance. That's because our insurance money and all of that is done and that project is over with for the City Hall flood. And then for insurance down here, we talked about last time that we budgeted a 7% increase for both years on this, but we actually think it'll be less, at least for next year. So that was a bit of good news. We think it'll probably be 4%. Okay. So again, I like being wrong in that direction. So that was a bit of good news there. And we also found our workers' comp claim was going down also, so also good. And then for the contingencies, again, these are all 1-year increments. We don't have anything for the facilities that we're putting aside for a savings plan. And then Will, did you want to talk about the IT savings plan associated with that contingency?
Yes, I shall. So I'm channeling my inner IT manager because he just left the city. So here I am.
Did I just hear that you no longer have an IT manager? Is that what okay.
You can apply for that on.
I don't think you can afford me.
We do have an acting IT manager who is actually the police technology officer who we borrowed, but that's why I'm having to do this part of the briefing. So we have, like the other capital savings plans, we have a capital savings plan for IT, and I downloaded the one that the guy had created before he left. And so the starting reserve in that savings plan was $178,813. And like most of our savings plans, there's a certain number of replacement years before the thing has to be replaced. Examples from this plan, although I may not know exactly what these things are or what they do, to be honest, are things like Hyper-V Host 6 servers, and those are being purchased in 27. We have more of them being purchased in 33. We have things like Citrix host servers, core networking equipment switches, phone system hosts, Exchange hosts, video surveillance servers, backup systems, and uninterruptible power supply units. And these all have a replacement year for when they're going to be purchased. And so money is put aside and then drained down and put aside. So does that work?
Yes, very good. Don't go anywhere because you're next.
Oh, let me get my other notes then.
Yes. Okay, any questions before we move on to the city manager budget? Okay,
Before you begin, I remember last year we had conversations about you getting help. Before you even start on that and I going with the numbers, Will, do you feel that you have enough support and help and that you're good?
I'll answer that for you. We have a policy analyst that was in that financial forecast to start in FY 27-28, which will be of great help to Will.
See?
But it is not in this budget.
Wah, wah.
Katie impressed upon me that I couldn't keep going like this, and so I compromised and said we could add a position in the next biennium if I could get through this biennium, which was in an attempt to keep our expenses down.
Now, again, we haven't even started talking about this. I'm just gonna make it, and I don't know if everybody shares that feeling with it. I think we're doing a really good job. I think it's very important that you recognize that, you know, when help is needed for you. So I guess I'm just trying to say, I know Katie finally convinced you 2 years from now and whatnot. I just want to make sure that you know that, at least from my seat on the bus, I want to make sure that you have the support and staff needed for you to do your job. I guess that's what, and I'm saying this because last year we talked about it and we're gonna go on this, and I kind of already see that you're at 0.06, 0.6, so go on.
Where?
So because of the restructuring of engineering, partly to save money, I have taken over direct control over the capital engineering group as well as being the site manager. And this is extremely cost effective. So the budget, so Katie decided to put 40% of my time to true it up with with what my time is spent on and allocate it to capital engineering because currently,
That's how much time he spends.
right, but that was, as I'm going to show you at our next meeting, an $800,000 a year savings for the city.
I love saving the city $800,000 a year. Well, that's great. What I don't want you is you burnt out and walking out of here before you complete the things that I know you want to do for your professional, and, you know, things that are dear and near to your heart for you to accomplish. So save $800,000, yay! Will burned out, can't do anything all because he's like running like a crazy person. Nah, it's so great. That's the only thing I'm saying.
No, I agree. I mean, I see you after hours working still and, you know, doing all city work and, I mean, that's not sustainable. I mean, that's my my observation.
And again, well, I and everyone in the city will say, yes, let's save $800,000. I will not say that if that means that you are, and because I know you can do it, is it sustainable for you to be for 2 more years
Yeah.
divided? And, you know, I just want recommendation for you to, you know, take that closer to your heart and maybe follow her advice. She might set that for next year and not 2 years from now. This just, right?
I mean, is there a way of adding that policy analyst now or instead of waiting 2 years to hire the policy house? I mean, you're spending 40% of your time somewhere else already.
But given that our overall staffing costs have increased by 9% per year, and given that there are other departments that are also running understaffed, such as one we're going to come on to in just a minute, which is HR, and code enforcement is understaffed. So I think I can tough it out till the second biennium, and at that point, we'll have grown a little bit on our property taxes and we'll be able to handle it.
No, you can. I just rather you don't have to. That's the difference. Like, as any, workforce that as we are managing, you know, people and we want to make sure that people are able to, you know, do their job, have their competency, do the things that, you know, that are needed. And no one is overloaded. And I see that you're concerned that everybody, we are understaffed everywhere. I worry about long-term, you know, you being able to, for like 2 years like that, chief.
I'll give up the code enforcement money. I know, but I'd still give it up.
And Will, take it with a grain of salt, because I mean, you're the one who has to do so I just want to protect you because you're an asset for the city. And I think everyone in this room will agree that if it comes one day that you're like, you know, because it's too much. Everybody's going to lose, and over what? You know, we want you well, and we want you happy, and we want you able to do all the things that you have to do and help everywhere. I guess from this committee, we just want to make sure that you are supported money wise. We want you to save money. We want budgets, reductions and whatever. Yay.
Have a compromise. So at the midpoint of this biennium, if we're seeing our revenue flows stronger than we predicted in the budget, if, for example, property tax assessment comes in better than we anticipate, that would be one lever. Then at that juncture, in the midpoint of the biennium, I will speak with the finance director about adding the policy analyst position earlier. How does that sound? I know I need to go to the gym more, mate. I know that. You're right.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to the resources page. I noticed that we skipped right over the contingencies.
Oh.
It's they're $2 million a year for computers. Is that page 44?
Oh, on the resources?
Yes. Which are contingencies. I mean, that's money we're spending in the future, right? I mean, the biggest number in here is the computer services. Is that
Yes.
actually for computer hardware? We spending 2 million a year on? computer-
No, that's for the IT department. That's for their,
Whole department.
yeah, that's for their, that's for,
Wages and everything?
yeah. That's for their IT department.
Okay. So can we kind of go over the rest of those numbers real quickly?
Sure, no problem. So the internal revenue for the admin recorder EM, that's gonna cover the city manager, city recorder. I believe that also covers community engagement. The internal revenue human resources is gonna cover human resources. The utility billing is gonna cover the share for utility billing. The internal revenue is gonna cover, that finance one is gonna cover finance. The computer services is, that probably should be relabeled. That's for IT. The
Yeah, it
internal,
should say IT department.
yeah, I don't know why it's always said computer services. It's for, all of the departments combined in here.
Okay, so under city manager, no big moves in this biennium. Slight inflationary increases have been added in some areas. I did add a bit more to travel and training to leave room for attending conferences. As you know, up until now, for the first 3 years, I haven't gone to any conferences. So if there's something on the agenda that looks worthwhile to the city, then I'll attend that. And then as Katie alluded to, 40% of my time right now is really being taken up by managing capital improvement program and tough projects. We do have a contract engineer that does the design work, but they're not here day to day to deal with the invoices and stuff like that. So that falls to me to do that. So yeah, so that's the city manager in a nutshell.
Can you tell me a little bit about what are the things that go under your professional services and why the reduction?
Yes, so professional services, we have used the bulk of that for scanning services. And we're anticipating, we hope, that within a year and a half, a little bit less actually now, we will have finished scanning all legacy documents, whether they belong to the city recorder's department or the city manager's department. So if you look at my invoice expenses for the last year, you'll see probably about 45–50% of that went into just scanning and shipping stuff off. And there might be a bit more of that, but that'll be coming to an end. Once the scanning is completely wrapped up, except for the historical things of importance to the city's history, you'll see me reducing the professional services down to a very low margin, probably something like 10,000.
Okay, move on to HR.
Good evening, everyone. I know a lot of the council, but I don't know a lot of the budget committee. So I'm going to start by explaining that I'm the interim HR manager. Now, that's a very important statement because that's going to explain the very big jump in salaries and numbers that you see on this first page. The thing about being an interim HR manager is that I was hired for the city in a HR project specialist position. And the way that the city works, I've been doing it, however, for almost 5 years. So it's with a small gap of 10 months when you had an assistant city manager. So I did it full time during the COVID, and then there was a 10-month period when you had an assistant city manager. That person left, and I have been the interim HR manager since. So the big jump in wages comes because you have got used to having a person who is a project specialist who's working out of class for the city. And it is in fact been me who has advised against changing my rate of pay. Both Will, just to be clear, and Katie have tried to put me on the HR manager scale, but I advise against it because I tell you the city does not want to set a precedent of that for any other person who might work out of class in their field. Because this can happen very often and frequently for cities, that you get somebody in a senior position who leaves, and for a long period of time until you find a new person, you have an interim person, and the city only pays 5% above wages for that person. So to give you, I wanted to give you a proper context of why this is jumping so high with the wages now going forward. The other thing about me is I retired once from a 25-year position on the East Coast, and therefore I don't take benefits from the city. A family plan now for a person costs about $32,000 a year. So if you even think of that over a 2-year budget, when you're projecting having a new HR manager, you also have to think about the cost of that they may come and need a family benefit plan. I also, because I'm not the HR manager, I'm not an exempt person, and therefore you don't pick up my pension contribution either. So there are many, yes, I know you're shaking your head, but yes. So I annualize out, I want to give you a rough idea. I'm a 0.75 person, and I annualize out at about $80,000 a year. That is why when you look at hiring a manager, the last manager you had, interestingly enough, I looked at the scales because I wanted to give you a context. In the recruitment that we're hoping to do next year, I'm going to stay on for another full year, but because I've already retired once, I'm feeling the need to retire again and to drop my hours back. But because I love working in the city, I've asked to stay on for 10 hours a week. I'm sure that the city can find 10 hours of work for me to do a week in various departments. I understand that various people are casting lots for my attendance. So I would like to stay on. So the last time you had an HR manager in 2021, your wage scale was 102,000 to 131,000. What we have in this current budget is 110,000 to 140,000. So really, all you're seeing in this current budget is a slight bit of inflation on the range that you want to have for an HR manager. The second part of this I wanted to mention in the wages is you'll see that there's an extra generalist in year 2. In other words, I will work another whole year with one generalist. And again, I want to be clear that Will and Katie both offered me a second generalist this year. And the reason I don't want to do that is more strategic. Last time we did a recruitment, and we've done 4 for an HR manager in my time here, but last time we did a recruitment, the teams that got to the final were all coming from departments that had a great deal of support. Sorry, I've not been looking more to the left. I apologize for that. But they were supervising departments of 5, 7, 17. And so the sort of people you're going to get when you hire an HR manager are either people coming up from a senior generalist level who want to go to the next step in their career, or you're going to get people who are moving out of a larger job, a much bigger job, wanting to come down to a smaller environment. Okay, that's my prediction anyway. And it would be a very good incentive for a new HR manager if they can hire a person, because this allows them to come in fresh, to look at the department. A lot of my colleagues are nodding, and to design it the way they think it would best work for them going forward. So I don't want to have that person now. I want to gracefully back out. Also, we've done a great job. This is the 2nd year of the HR generalist, and she is now fully capable of doing all the life cycle of the city. So that has been and has made great headways in getting to know all the staff, and is carving her own path. That's Sydney Kosmicki, and she is doing her SHRM CP this year. That was in the travel and training for last year. She's also going to the SHRM conference in San Diego to get a feel for what 20,000 HR managers looks like in one spot, and to understand what options might be available to her for her career. But I know that were anything to, there would be no way of leaving you in the lurch if anything were to happen to me, because you now have a very solid backup person who can run all the basics for the city. So that was the goal, and I feel I've achieved that. So if you're wondering why there's a massive jump in the salaries, that is because there's the extra generalist, and for all the reasons I've explained to you. I also don't, I'm, as I said, not exempt person. So we'll go on down to the next line items, which are also bigger, of course, so you'll see that's why the pension line item is bigger, because of the picking up of PERS for the new person, and because you've got an extra generalist in there who will be paying pension as well. That's the employer and the employee portion in that number. And then the extra money in the health and life is, again, because you have to anticipate that both the generalist and the new HR manager might have a $32,000 a year family plan, or more if the rates go up next year. Okay, next, you will see the recruitment expense, and the recruitment expense is not necessarily a given thing that we will spend. It's just that when you need it, you can't come up with it. You have to have it somewhere in case you might need it. And again, to give you some context, the last time in 2022, we didn't complete the hiring for a new ACM because Will withdrew the position, and that cost $30,000. And the last time you hired a city manager, not Will, the one before that, also cost $30,000. And just to give you again more context, in 2020 budget, when you were looking at hiring a public works director, an HR director, and a police chief, the budget, the city manager at the time estimated $40,000 to $50,000 a recruitment for each of those positions for external recruitment. So putting $70,000 in this recruitment line item, even though we may not spend it, because we always try to find people without doing that, and we haven't used a single one since I've been in this position, I don't think, Will, have we?
No,
No,
no.
no. So this,
LinkedIn.
We just thought, since we've had trouble with this
Yes.
position in the past, that we wanted to add money just in case we needed to use an external recruitment this time around.
just in case we need to find it, it has to be somewhere, the money. That was it's preemptive is all it is. Next down is travel and training. It looks the same, but actually there's it's not really the same because the whole thing of Sydney getting her Sherman going to the conference was in the previous budgets. What's in the new budgets are two new things. We often find that people going from a very competent programmatic type of position into a management position need more supervisory training to understand what the role of coaching and having, I think we all know this, having difficult conversations with an employee in a position where you are the manager is not something you learn intuitively. So in this new budget, there are some two per year, 3-hour training sessions for new managers from a outside coach to try and teach people how to learn that skill or to gain some of those skills. And the other thing I've been looking at for some time since I've been here is the leadership training for the public works operations and maintenance teams. Every leadership training that I've seen since I've been here has been more white collar work. And you don't really see the construction workers in the field doing roads and ditches and sewers. So in this new training, there is a Build WIT program, which I want to experiment with, which is pretty inexpensive. It's about $5,000 a year with a $2,500 setup fee in the first year for 50 users. And it's leadership training from a giant national construction consortium of people who do leadership incentive training for people working. They call it the Dirt World. And it's for people working. I want to try and connect our municipal teams to the national infrastructure teams that are in the country who are really doing the backbone of work in construction and operations. It might be slightly less useful for the operations team, but I think it'd be really good for the maintenance team. So it's an experiment. So that's in travel and training. And then you get to professional services, another massive number. There's a 7% increase on all our modules for just hiring people, NeoGov and eLearn modules. That's not really accounting for it. What's really the big number in here is a class and comp study in the second year of the biennium. And there are two reasons for that. The Oregon Equal Pay Act it provides that it's a good defense if a city has done a thorough class and compensation study within the last every 3 years. The last one we did was in 2021, and it would be due to come up. The second reason for the timing is the CBAs all expire in June of 2027. And if we do one in 2026, we will be well placed to go into collective bargaining with proper data in our hands about the market. Now, I just wanted to also, before I just finish talking about that, tell you that the last class and comp we did had 4 quotes. So I just want you to know I didn't pull this number of 70,000 out of the air. But the last 4 quotes were $109,725, $84,000, $58,327, which we took, and $73,710. Each of those had a component in it which we would not need to repeat, which was the job description analysis. And if I look at the cheapest one that we actually took, that was about 30% of the cost. So I'm thinking about inflation and the downgrading of about $12,000 or $13,000, and I came up with a number of $60,000 to $70,000 to have as a class and comp study. And I think that's all I have to say. Other than that, I could provide my 10 hours of help to Will.
We're all fighting over it.
Yeah, I'm sure people are gonna be like, nope, you come come work with us, no, with us, give us some of your time. You're doing a great job. I,
Question.
yes, please.
Yes, of course.
So for the recruitment, now that we know that the IT manager, I mean, is that just for the HR position?
No, I don't think it'll just be for the HR position. I'm hoping to, it's the HR position plus having a little money contingency in case there's another position that you never know when you're going to lose a more senior member of staff, and you need to have, it's just putting a little extra money in there. I wouldn't have thought that I'm guessing that if we went external on a recruitment for an HR manager, maybe 30 or 40,000, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But there's another part in there in case, what if somebody else in a more senior position leaves, you know, over a 2-year period, which is entirely possible.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I don't know if that would be enough. for-
Well, we could also get lucky and not need, you know, we could find an HR manager by doing networking, you know, we could get lucky and it'll stay there and it won't get used at all, but
Right.
it's just, it was a compromise of what should we put in there, right? I wanted to put in just one, and then with Katie and Will thought, let's bump it up a little in case there's something else that happens.
If we don't spend it, that's great, but it's hard to find money when you don't have it and then something comes up. So we just thought it would be better to have something there just in case.
On that safety program, is that for the whole city of Newburgh?
Oh, actually, the safety program doesn't really use very much money. It's not really, it is for the whole city of Newburgh, but it's morely for peripheral items for the safety team who meet occasionally. And I also wanted to mention how well appreciated, thank you, the employee recognition funds have been from last year that you allowed to be put in the budget. That's $100 per person. And people have done the most amazing fun stuff with it. Gone on outings, had days. What was yours called, Corey? It was
So we started with a community scavenger hunt. to
Yeah.
Go meet our community partners. And then we followed up with training, and then we had, just had all kinds of things throughout the day, and ended with something fun, which was Library Olympics. Which I'm not sure, I mean, there was no running in the library.
Yes.
Not with scissors anyway. Yeah, so we did, we just kind of made it a whole day, and staff really bonded well.
Yeah.
It was great.
I think the teams are doing well with that money, and it's in there again with just an addition of potentially 3 staff, which is why it's just a little bit more.
One thing I wanted to talk about briefly was the class and comp study. So the costs that are organic to doing the class and comp study actually represent pennies on the dollar of what you save when you go beak to beak in the CBA negotiation. Because if you roll into that meeting and you don't have good data, then your union reps are going to eat you alive. So it's actually pays off on the, can you get the deal done for 3% or will it have to be higher? If you can prove that 3% is market rate, it really strengthens your bargaining position.
Save money. Any other questions?
Okay, we'll move on to city recorder. Thank you, Allison. And that's on page 52.
Hello again. Happy to be back. We only have a few changes this year. One of the big ones you'll see is we are moving the digital archivist grant writer into my team out of the engineering team. This is part of the restructuring of our engineering department and moving them. It makes more sense for someone doing this work to report to me. So he'll be moving into our team in July, and I cannot wait to have him. He's fantastic. I've got to brag for 2 seconds that he has like cleaned up all of the engineering documents so beautifully and reduced our extra paper in the building in an amazing way. So we're excited to bring him in. Yep.
Hopefully mine.
Yes, we're gonna have him come work on some of these other departments with us. It's really exciting. I can't wait to have him. Everyone needs someone to come through their house and clean up all their paperwork, right? Yeah. A new career opportunity for us. So you'll see a little bit of an increase because of that addition to our department. In addition, there is a little bit of an increase in our travel and training line, and that's to allow all of our staff to be able to go to conferences. We have another staff member, and I want to allow for Melissa to be able to attend conferences and trainings. I am currently working towards my certified municipal clerk certification, and she is going to start hers. I'll be done with mine very soon, a few months. And so she's going to be doing hers. So we increased that line to allow both of us and Dylan to be able to attend trainings as needed. And you'll see in professional services, that's gone up a little bit, mostly to finish our scanning project and finish all of our digitized documents. Very excited about how that's going. We're on track. And if you want a tour sometime, I'll show you all the rooms we've cleared out. It's pretty wonderful. And then the other portion of that is actually paying for my temporary assistant Madison here while Melissa's out on maternity leave soon. So we have an extra person, extra body around while she is out. So we budgeted for that. Other than that, things have stayed stable. We're not increasing our other lines at all, I believe, because we want to just be good responsible, fiscally responsible people. As you've heard many times, a lot of us are going, we wanted to reduce this, but Katie wouldn't let us because we need to actually spend money to do our jobs. But no, it's, you see that you've got a lot of staff who want to do that. So any questions?
Any questions for Rachel? You did an amazing job, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to community engagement on 54.
And I'm speaking for this one too. The Community Engagement Department reports to me as well. This is Emily, our PIO. One thing you'll see is she is currently one of our employees that's working out of class as our interim public information officer. We realized she was doing many of the duties related to public information more than just a graphic design specialist. So she was given that title and a slight bump. You'll see there's an increase in her travel and training budget to allow for the tuition reimbursement program that we have available through the city. She is starting a master's in public administration this fall, and she's really excited about it. And hopefully after that, we can look at maybe making her a permanent public information officer. So that is the main change you'll see for the community engagement line.
Hearing none, we can move along.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move to finance on page 56. So I really only had 2 increases on my budget. The first one is gonna be, again, travel and training. You're hearing that a lot from departments. I wanted to be able to do more travel and training with all of my staff. A lot of the conferences typically only cater to people of my level, and we found a conference for our finance system, the Tyler Technologies, that is for all levels of people who use it. So we wanted to be able to send as many of our staff members in finance as possible to that one next year. It's a very hands-on conference, and we get a lot of training at that one. And we've heard from other cities it's extremely beneficial. So I've added a little extra money in the travel and training budget for that. And then the maintenance agreements, that one goes up significantly. Well, not significantly, but that one has a little bit of a jump. And the 2 that are in there are the finance system, the Tyler Technologies finance system, and then the budget system, OpenGov. Both of those have contractual 5% increases each year. So that is what accounts for that main jump there. Yeah. Software's not cheap.
All of our IT platforms are 5% higher.
Yeah. And that is gonna be it for all of the finance portions. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Maintenance,
Yes. So that is for our finance system across the platform, so finance, utility billing, court, and then the OpenGov budget software piece. No.
So we're looking at line, through 533,045.
Yes. So we budgeted 139,000 and then it's gonna go up to,
150.
yeah, like 150.
So last year was $5,000.
No, last year was 139,000.
No.
Oh, I see what you're saying, the actuals.
No, fiscal year 24.
Yeah, the fiscal year 24.
Last year, how did it go from 5,000 to 140,000?
Because I think we changed where we put it because it was in professional services. If you look down there,
Oh, okay.
yeah, we booked it down there in
Yeah.
professional
So
services.
professional services went from 202.
Yeah,
To, so it just, it moved from one account to another.
yeah.
And
good catch.
when we actually bought the AP system initially, the setup cost was an ARPA project. So the city, that's how we paid to begin all this new software. We didn't pay a lump sum, ARPA did.
Got it.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to IT. And Will's gonna help me with IT. So our interim IT manager, Dave, is at a conference right now. So Will and I are gonna attempt this one. So if you have any very technical IT questions, it may have to wait till next meeting when Dave will be back.
I'm going to, first of all, we are in a process where we have an interim IT manager. We have just started a recruitment for a new permanent IT manager. So we're looking for a very high standard of person. We're looking for leadership. We're looking for somebody who has one of the two computer management degrees or a cybersecurity degree would maybe be equivalent. And so that might take a while for us to actually fill that seat. That's going to be a hard seat to fill at the very modest pay scales that governments can offer. Obviously, private sector pays a lot more to its IT people, but there have been a lot of very useful layoffs recently. So we know that there may be some folks in the market. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. The second thing, well, you know, reap what you can reap, right? The other thing is that the IT savings plan is, as I covered that earlier, that's mostly servers of various sorts for various applications. The one thing in here, which is a big hike, is the line item 31,133,533,045 maintenance agreements. Now, some of that was gobbled up by 5% and 7% increases for software platforms like Splunk and other internal service platforms.
Microsoft Office was a big one that had an increase.
But there is also in there a new platform, which is to move part of our dispatch service into the cloud so that we get better connectivity. So right now, you may have heard of the time a couple of years ago when a guy with a Sawzall accidentally cut through one of the power supplies in this building. And so we lost dispatch for a few seconds while we had to roll over to WACA because we have an emergency agreement to do that. Well, one of the reasons why we're looking at cloud basing part of the dispatch through a vendor called Central Square is because that would decentralize that dispatch service so that we wouldn't have any server vulnerability. Right. So that's a good chunk of change. You know, the net annual increase could be $130,000 or something like that. However, it's a safer and more secure system. It also does one other thing. It creates extensibility. And although I can't give tremendous specifics right now, the city is in negotiation with some smaller agencies to see if they would like to use our dispatch service at a good a very fair billing rate. And so if that were to occur, we would have some offsets because we wouldn't have a limit for the number of servers to cope with that added workload if that happened.
Can I ask a question about that? Do you have capacity, chief?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that's the main.
And will it bring revenue to the city, chief? And,
Yes.
How does much it look
Okay.
like?
Capacity, will it impact your amazing response times significantly?
It should not. We're not, I wouldn't be interested in necessarily growing the the dispatch center unless it made money for the city. That we're, we're not gonna trade one for one. There's no reason to do that. But we are in some talks with 3 different agencies, that are interested. And we'll work that out to see if we, have the capacity and if it makes sense to take them on and if the city can bring in revenue. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
any other questions? Hearing none, move along.
And then if you turn to page 62, this is our legal department. And there really weren't any major changes this year. There was just a small increase on office supplies for our city prosecutor, just some equipment repair or replacement, I should say, that we need to do that we haven't done in a while. And then we've kept our legal expenses. That's where we book our Miller Nash contract, and those have stayed pretty well in budget this year. So we are keeping that the same for the next 2 years as well. And there really weren't any other significant changes on this one. Any questions on the legal budget?
Wages are just up because the contract. The salary and wages on the first line.
That's for our part-time city prosecutor. And then that's the only personnel that we have in the legal department. And then we contract everything out under the legal expenses with Miller Nash. Okay. So that's gonna be it for Fund 31 tonight. The next 3 departments in Fund 31 are all public works, and so we're gonna talk about those next time. So we're gonna move on to Fund 3, which is on page 73. And Chief's gonna come back up here. Although I guess I can do this one, because there really wasn't much on this one. Yeah, that's fine. So Fund 3 is for our civil forfeitures. We had a decent forfeiture last year, which is where we get this fund balance at. But we're not anticipating any more forfeitures coming up in the next 2 years. It's kind of unpredictable when we're gonna get those.
Well, we'll take them if we can get them, but
Yeah.
nothing planned.
Yeah, we don't have any that we've had this one that was a larger one that was $20,000 that had been sitting, that we knew that was coming, and so that you'd probably had seen in the budget before. But we don't have any that we're anticipating coming.
$10 there.
Yeah, so some interest, and that's about it. Any questions on the civil forfeiture fund? There's not a lot of activity here, so. Okay. So we'll move on to Fund 13, which is on page 75. This is the 911 tax fund. So this one is where we record our 911 revenue that we receive from the state. So this is part of that state shared revenue that we get for having a dispatch center. And that's where you'll see those on the first line items for the revenues, the 911 excise taxes. So the state has said that we'll expect a 9% increase for next year for FY 25-26. And so we're expecting probably a 5% increase that year after, just based on historical trends. It's usually about 5%. So you'll see that for those revenues there. And then the interest, we've trued it up to what we've been receiving for interest on here. And then for the expenditures on page 76, these fund 3 communication officers or dispatchers. And we try and use up as much of these funds as we can to help offset our cost from the general fund for having a dispatch center. Any questions on this fund? Yes, Mike?
So why would this state be giving us approximately 9% increase this year, where you think after that it's gonna be 5%? Why would they just be giving us more? What causes that, I guess?
Yeah, and that one I wasn't sure why we were getting a little bit more this year. I'll find out on that. I've just noticed historically it's only really been 4 or 5%, but next year it was gonna be 9%, which was slightly unusual.
And that's because we have a 911 call center. And how many are around the state? I mean, is there a lot of them or just a few?
They've tried to narrow them down to 1 per county, but that's unsuccessful. There's 2 in this county, 2 in, I don't know exactly how many for sure. There's PSAPs and then there's like OSP it's not a true 911 center because they don't dispatch medical. So they don't get any of these 911 funds. So they're not they're not a PSAP. If that helps. Nothing else?
Okay. We'll move
You
on
guys are
to-
like, no questions today. Alrighty, let's move along.
We'll move on to the Public Safety Fund, which is Fund 16 on page 78. So for the FTE on here, again, I wanted to highlight in FY 27, there's 0 communication officers here, and that's because we saw those move to the general fund already. For the revenues, the public safety fee and actually the communication officer fee, both are tied to the CPIU West, which was a 2.8% increase this year. So we budgeted for that for FY 25-26 and then assumed 3% for the year after. And you'll see for the communication officer fee, we only have 1 year of revenue there because we're anticipating this fee to go away in the second part of the biennium, which is why we see those officers go away also in that second year. And then for the patrol side, this funds 3 officers from that public safety fee. And then for the police communication side, this is the funding for 2 communication officers. And again, this is just for the 1 year increment here because we're anticipating that revenue to go away in that second year.
Any questions?
Okay, I think that's all we had for you tonight. Yeah. So next meeting is,
We'll go back, we'll go back to those 3 funds 31s that are public
Yes.
works and then we'll.
yes, next meeting will primarily be the Public Works Fund, so it'll be Fund 2, 6, 7, 17. We'll talk about those 3 departments in Fund 31. And then we'll talk about the Building Fund and Fund 14, also Economic Development. And that will be on May 6th.
These are fund savings from the engineering reorganization.
Perfect.
They cut across many different sections of the budget, so I brought it all together.
Thank you. Okay,
And that's all I have.
all right. Any other comments, questions before we adjourn? So everybody move, next week, and Katie and Rachel, you guys did a great job in keeping us informed and agenda what's next. And so if we do not have any further questions, I will call this meeting to adjourn. And the next meeting will be May 6th and then May 13th. Very good with that? Good
Yes.
evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.